Attention. It's time to register for Ellucian Live 2024, April 7th through 10th in San Antonio, Texas. Illuminate, innovate, inspire, explore higher education's greatest opportunities with future-ready ideas, solutions, and best practices designed to drive transformation. Register now at elive.ellucian.com. This conference is going to be epic. By now, you've heard me talk about Insights EDU in Phoenix, Arizona, February 20 through 22nd. Here's why I think you should join us at the Insights EDU conference. It's one of the few conferences focused on helping schools serve today's online and non-traditional students. If you're concerned at all about where your enrollments are going to come from in 2024 and beyond, and you should be concerned, you need to be at this conference. Register now at insightsedu.com and use promo code EdUp to save $50.
Prepare to be astonished.
Welcome, everyone, to the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. My name is Dr. Michelle Gunther-Wilson. I am your host today, filling in for the great and world-famous Dr. Joe Sallustio. I am a community college trustee at San Jacinto College in Southeast Houston. I'm also the owner of Vida Linda Consulting, a higher education leadership consulting firm. Find me on LinkedIn. It's always a pleasure to meet with our higher ed community and with others. So I often get to host or fill in for Joe Sallustio as a host on the show, but I am very excited today about my guest co-host because he has an unusual background and he has a lovely perspective on his purpose. He is the senior advisor for the Project on Workforce at Harvard University. He is also a former public servant, former chief innovation officer at the U.S. Department of Labor. And what I learned about him was that he feels strongly about replicating the opportunities that someone replicated for him. He has a very beautiful origin story. I encourage you to look him up and to connect with him on LinkedIn. His name is Chike Agwu. Chike, it is a pleasure to have you today. Please say hello to our audience.
Thank you so much for having me. I really look forward to this conversation. I just thank you all just for having me here in this really beautiful space that you all have created.
Thank you. It is a beautiful space and it's a fun space and it's an innovative space. And speaking of innovation, our guest today is the Director General at International Baccalaureate. His name is Olli-Pekka Heinonen. And Olli-Pekka, it is fascinating to talk to you today. I did look you up as well, and I'm not going to give anything away because we're going to let you tell your story. But I am going to bring in some really interesting points that you make on things like interaction society, on the ethical considerations of a new era, on how the different eras like the industrial era and the information era have kind of determined how we assess and think about education. It is a pleasure to have you. Please say hello. Tell us who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving the opportunity to join. Really looking forward to our discussion with both of you. Yes, I'm Olli-Pekka Heinonen, and I am the Director General at the International Baccalaureate and have been in that position for 2.5 years. And I am trying to act in a way that I would get the education system called International Baccalaureate to move closer to its purpose, which is to make the world a better and more peaceful place through education. And that actually is something that quite often I learned that kind of purpose statements are something that are spoken in the official speeches and then forgotten. But I must say that in the case of IB, I hear it quoted every day. It's very interesting that it's very deeply in the DNA of people working in the organization and in the whole community. So I'm trying to just align us all to do a better job for education globally, as we are an organization working in 159 countries. with about 5,700 schools, of which about 1,900 are in the US.
Very interesting. So, International Baccalaureate, tell me what you specifically do. What does the organization do? Clearly, you have an extensive reach and very wide engagement, but break it down for our audience. What do you do? If you had just a few lines to tell us how it works, what would those be?
Well, IB is providing educational programs. We are together with schools creating kind of learning paths for those schools, for those school communities to develop, to be able to provide those 4 education programs that we are responsible of. Those programs touch students from 3 years old to 19 years old. And kind of, we are not in direct connection with the students, but the schools are. But we're giving the schools the capabilities and the program frameworks that have been successful for 55 years. IB was created actually out of conflict. It was really created with the idea that the people who created it had experienced the Second World War, and were very kind of conscious and serious about the idea of creating an education system which would enable that to never happen again. So it has a kind of a very strong kind of a social mission behind it. And then those people came together and started to create the first program. And the main ideas behind it are, first of all, giving the breadth and depth of education in kind of one package, having a very holistic approach of student development, and also enabling going deeper in certain subjects. Inquiry-based approach is another issue that it's known of. Being able to have the high quality of curiosity, asking the right questions, understanding different perspectives, being able for critical thinking, and in that sense, the kind of a constant learning capability. The service orientation is maybe the third element that I would like to mention. The idea that you cannot actually pass the diploma program without doing the service for the community or the society at large. That it's not only about kind of what you can get out of the world, but it's really strongly emphasizing also the idea that what you can do for the world, and really that connection with what's happening in the world, making sure that education and schools are not kind of separate institutions and then there is the world, but actually that education is about the world.
I think, Olli-Pekka, I think this is a really powerful kind of what you've said, and I'd love to drill in there a little more. I started my career as an educator in New York City almost 20 years ago. Taught second grade, and for those of us who are teachers, we know International Baccalaureate here in the States as kind of a gold standard, if not the gold standard, for kind of particularly advanced curricula, particularly for folks in the high school setting. I have one set of questions on your career in government. As a former public servant myself, I'm sure we can trade stories. I'll save those for later. But one of the big questions we're wrestling here with in the States is, what should kids be learning? So there are a bunch of political questions, which we might come to, but there's, I think, more foundational question, which is, I think that education is this battle between the timeless and the just in time. There are things that that human beings have been doing for thousands of years that we think are really important. You've actually spoken to a number of them: curiosity, leadership, communication, so on and so forth. But then there are ways the world is changing very quickly, particularly in regard to technology. And so one, I'm curious, the IB's process for figuring out how you change over time in terms of what you believe students should actually be learning. And then very specifically, what are the big things that you're looking to integrate into IB in the coming years, particularly as technology is not, I keep saying changing, but it's changed already. And so curious what's your process? And then right now, what are the things that you're looking to bring in for that just in time as the world and the economy are really changing?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great question. I would again go back to the history of the organization, because it was created by educators, by heads of schools, and that has kind of been the mode of operandi in the organization, so that it's very practitioner-led. And what do I mean by that? I mean that having also worked with the national education system, that we don't have a similar kind of political decision making on the top level of the organization, but we are very strongly all the time connected with the practitioners, the teachers, the heads, the administrators. And actually, we have about 50,000 educators around the world who are kind of bringing in their expertise for us to develop our programs. And they are also the one who are doing a kind of a major part of implementing them, as they are involved in the organizing the workshops for professional development or for other professionals, doing the marking of our exams, creating the exams, taking part in the curriculum reform and the reform of the programs and so on. So in that sense, kind of, that is the learning loop that we have created inside the organization. And what is then the kind of content-wise, coming to your question, that what are the things that students should learn? I think that we are living in a special time in that sense, that the idea of the intergenerational transfer task, that everything that we humans have been able to create so far will be transferred to new generations, that will be important in the future, but it's not enough. That we have to be able to support the students to be able to create their own future. And that requires different things. Of course, it requires the competencies. And there's been already for more than 20 years that discussion about 21st century skills. And I've been kind of started thinking that they are called that because it takes a whole century to learn to teach them. Because there's a huge gap still in education systems with kind of the talk about them, and then that how they can be embedded in the pedagogical solutions and the reality of everyday work in schools. And that's something that we are working very strongly with different universities and experimenting all the time with schools. And another thing, what is something that we're seeing is becoming important, is the identity kind of creation of the students, so that they can create their own identity, which can and will enable them to throughout their life to find the purpose of themselves. What is it that really lights them up? What is the things that they find meaning in? And I think that's an issue that is more and more important to the young generation, really to see that what are the things that in the world around them is meaningful.
Right.
And maybe kind of last thing I would like to mention, something that we're experimenting at the moment, is that if we're thinking about the purpose of IB, making the world more peaceful and better, then there's the question that comes with that how do you make peace? How do you do good? Or even how do you make better happen? And then we come to the questions of understanding, for example, how the world works as systems. Looking at sustainable development goals, for example, that how to understand what kind of involvement and action is needed to give one's best and reach the potential to make those systems function better. And it also is then also about kind of being able to kind of understand change leadership and also kind of futures thinking. And I think that kind of capabilities are something that will become more and more important in the curriculums of the K-12 education.
Olli-Pekka, you say two things, or you made me think of two things as you were speaking. One of them was at the very end, when you kind of took this into a very powerful philosophical question of how do you make peace, and tying that to what we're teaching students in our systems today. And I immediately thought of how this is kind of tied to family units, how what part of your approach feels very familiar to me, because it's what I try to do as a mother, to teach my children to know who they are. You said identity creation for students. And I think, you would agree as parents that we're constantly seeking to make sure that our children know who they are and that they know what they want to do. You mentioned, Olli-Pekka, in an interview that I saw, questions about what is beautiful and how do we teach our young people to ask those questions and to determine what is beautiful to them. This idea of peace and making the world a better place, it feels very far-reaching for me in our country right now, but so beautifully aspirational that I think that the question that I heard you ask in a podcast, in an interview, if the world changes what is taught, or if the world changes, then shouldn't what is taught and what is assessed change as well? I just didn't anticipate, and I'm just expressing my surprise right now as a in terms of this humanity we have here, I didn't anticipate that we would be aiming to teach such deeply held core values in a program. So I commend you for taking us in that direction. I think, Chike, you had a question or a statement about that. I'm just pleasantly surprised to find us talking about something as deep as how do you make peace?
And I think the question is maybe ties to the one that I had, which is, you mentioned that at the top of our conversation that 159 countries that you all are doing work in, and I am also curious how my parents and my family, I'm the first person in my entire family born in America. My family's from Nigeria originally, and so I think about, you're also accounting for a massive geographic, cultural, demographic variation, across all that. And so I'm curious how you think about the universal versus the particular. How do you leave that room for these school leaders to put in their own cultural context? But then also there are some things that, whether you're in Nigeria, whether you're in the United States, or whether you're in Nepal, there are things that every student should know and capacities that they should have. And so how do you think about that as you all are doing this? Because it's a hard task, even within a single country. It's a hard task to have a different geographies, let alone across 159 countries. I'm curious how IB thinks about that.
I'm grateful that you asked that question, because I don't think it would have been possible to happen for us to be in 159 countries without the fact that actually the IB programs, especially when we're talking about the programs from 3 to 12 years, the primary year programs, and then from there on to 16, the middle year programs, they are kind of more than strict curriculums. They are frameworks, they are kind of approaches to teaching and learning. And that means that they are always embedded in the local context. So it's always the question of the national culture, the national languages, the question of what are the kind of legislative boundaries in that region that we're working. So that's the thing that really enables it. And it's a very deliberate decision, because we do believe that you have to know your own culture, your own language first. And then that actually enables you to value also other cultures, other perspectives, and to kind of see the larger picture of the global reality. So that's how it is really happening.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not. For a third straight year, the EdUp Experience will be recording live at Ellucian Live 2024 this year in San Antonio, Texas, April 7th through the 10th. Illuminate, innovate, and inspire. That's the framework for the conference. Leaders from institutions around the world will converge at Ellucian Live 2024 to discover game-changing technology, share industry insights, and build powerful connections. It's time to explore higher education's greatest opportunities with future-ready ideas, solutions, and best practices designed to drive transformation. You can register now at elive.ellucian.com.
Epic.
Oh, yeah.
You've heard me talk about the Insights EDU conference. Well, let me tell you 3 reasons why I think everyone listening should join us in Phoenix, Arizona on February 20 through 22nd for Insights EDU. 1, it's one of the few conferences focused on helping schools serve today's online and non-traditional students. 2, you can expect a mix of speakers you won't hear anywhere else, including higher ed leaders from Google, LinkedIn, Adobe, and more. And reason 3, Insights EDU has an agenda packed with sessions discussing the latest trends in higher ed leadership, marketing, and enrollment management. Register now at insightsedu.com and use promo code EdUp to save $50 off your registration.
Oh, yeah.
Olli-Pekka,
Sure.
just curious, because I know based on what Chike was sharing earlier, that this is a rigorous curriculum, that it is well known for its rigor. But when it comes to the student experience, what is different for them? What will they find in IB that they have not seen before?
Well, I would like to kind of take up what is the feedback that I hear the most often when I meet students who have gone through the IB programs. The thing that they are saying is that the first thing actually they are saying that the first years in university were so much more easier for us than others. We had already, with the IB diploma program, we had done things that normally are done only on the university level.
Wow.
And so I think that is something that they are experiencing what is different. Another thing that what is really different is, I would say, the inquiry approach to really feed that curiosity of young people and to gradually kind of teach and support them to kind of start to take responsibility of their own learning as they are ready for that kind of a step. And I think that is something that is so important in today's world, where we know that the pace of change is so fast that you have to constantly be capable of dealing with kind of unexpected situations and new challenges. So I would say that is definitely another thing. The third thing they are saying is that the IB program, it's tough, that it's highly demanding, that it was a struggle, but I'm glad that I went through it. That's what they are saying, and I think that's true too. That it is a demanding, especially because of the breadth and the depth that we want to give all the students.
And so would you say with that inquiry-based model that there is an opportunity for someone like me with a background in education, someone like Chike with a background in teaching as well, that there is an opportunity for differentiation based on student need? We know that equity is a big concern for us in our education systems, and making sure that students are all starting off from, as equal footing as we could possibly provide, and also individualizing instruction so that students, we can meet them where they are. Is that part of the IB program, that differentiation and that individualization of instruction?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's kind of understanding the needs of every student, and kind of understanding the development phase of that student, and being able to evaluate what is the progress that they are making. And in that sense, kind of formative assessment is a big part of the IB program, kind of a constant dialogue with the student and the teacher. So definitely, and I fully agree with the idea that is also the way to reach inclusive and equal education. It's not that we're kind of treating everybody the same, but I think that there is a kind of a bigger need in today's world to really be able to understand the diversity of the students, and to be able to support each student the way he or she needs support. That's kind of looking at the PISA results, for example, of the developed countries. There's no progress there. It's a kind of a flat line. And I think that's the reason that in the developed countries, the national systems, they have kind of hit the limit when you try to kind of reach kind of equality through doing the same things for each student. And to really make progress, you have to move to the next, more challenging level of kind of personalized learning and support.
I can't help but think about this idea that we are somehow getting better, or that some organizations, institutions, schools are getting better at inclusivity and equity and individualized instruction and differentiation. But we're faced with this new era, which you called the interaction society, Olli-Pekka, where AI is so advanced that you said, Chike, earlier, it's happened. It's changed already. Or one of you said that we are not in a changing society. We are not in changing tech. We are in changed tech. We are absolutely behind the game, I think, when it comes to understanding the power of AI. But how do we merge those two ideas, that we have advanced technology and what you aspire for, which is an interaction society, right? Somehow I'm tying that to technology, right? An interaction society, not among people only, but also with the technology that we have at our disposal. and marrying that with providing better instruction to all students so that they can achieve, identity creation, and they can ask these important questions, and they can have an inquiry-based approach to life. How do those ideas of individualization and light speed technological learning go together?
I think that is really the kind of piece where the new technology can help. I see that the kind of biggest advances that AI, for example, and other kind of digital applications can bring to educations are connected to kind of course and class planning for teachers, or kind of limit or being able to lighten up the administrative burden and that a lot of teachers are struggling with.
Very good.
In kind of that sense, freeing up time to really meet the students. And that's really what I think we have the lack of, is that time to meet the students and be able to kind of support their learning. And that's actually a very basic human capability.
Yes.
And we should make sure that we don't lose it.
I think back to me almost in 2006 when I was a first-year teacher. And I think what you say is very accurate. If I were to break down the percentage of my time that was focused on teaching or preparing for teaching versus other things, it was not what I would have liked it to be. And I think that's true that was true of teachers then. I think it's very true of teachers now. And I think there are some powerful applications of that. Let me ask one other thing. So one thing that I'm sure it's not just in the US, but many educators are nervous about AI because what they are afraid of is that it also becomes a crutch or a short circuit for some, I think the critical thinking that an IB curriculum wants to create. Most teachers are afraid of, if I can ask ChatGPT or Bard to produce an essay, does that take away what, I went through, what I had to learn to write painfully, so on and so forth. And so I'm curious how the advice you have for educators, particularly from an IB perspective.
Yes, very good.
Think about the uses of AI, because it's here. It's not, we can't put it back. But how do you think about that in terms of what advice would you give educators how do you think about using AI for accommodating yourself to AI, particularly for such a rigorous curriculum where critical thinking, writing, inquiry is such an important piece?
Right.
Yeah. I think we come back to the question of that human connection with the students. When the ChatGPT launches were done, we kind of started also thinking about the question that, do we need to change something because what we see happening? And we pretty quickly actually noticed that we had all the kind of policies in place already and the instructions in place already to cope with that kind of challenges. Because there has been kind of test factories or essay factories for a long time. And we had created that kind of instruction that the teachers should, on the course of making a larger essay, they should involve and discuss with the student so that they can kind of observe whether the final outcome is really a production of that person's own thinking and creation. And of course, we are also seeing that AI can be used in writing essays, but then it should be quoted properly, the same way that we are quoting any research that we would be using as part of the essays. Kind of more generally thought, I think it might have a lot of impacts on, for example, doing homework for the traditional way. But I think that if there are, for example, certain things that need to be studied, if you end up with a situation that the materials that are needed to be studied, you are kind of asking questions about them the next day, that's something that you cannot bypass by AI.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Again, the question that it's the human who is kind of showing that what they are capable of doing, and not just bringing a paper back.
Right.
Nobody knows where it comes from.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And you made me, when you asked that question, Chike, I thought I saw an article just yesterday on using AI for lesson planning. And I mean, I'm not teaching right now, but it sure did make me want to play with some things, just because that's fascinating. You said that the crux of it, Olli-Pekka, is time. And we can differentiate, and we can individualize, and we can incorporate rigor, and we can use an inquiry-based model for student identity, but we need time. And how do we give the gift of time back to teachers? We deploy the use of AI. So I love your advice, Chike. I love the question that you asked. We're going to move now to our last two questions. And our first one, Olli-Pekka, is there anything that we have not covered that you want to make sure that our audience knows about? And the last question is, what do you think the future of higher education is?
Good questions. I think that maybe kind of one thing that I would like to share. We'll be doing a tour around the globe, partly virtually, online, and partly physically, a tour called Festival of Hope. It was the idea that right after the pandemic, we noticed that there was a strong shift in the kind of attitudes towards the future, kind of well-being, mental health issues. And we saw that there was a kind of a danger that some of the students might kind of lean towards apathy and kind of cynicism and kind of being passive. And we thought that we have to do something. And we thought that we came up with the idea that we wanted to help the students to direct that energy or bad feeling that they were having towards action. And that is the hope word that we're using is kind of a verb. It's what we can do to make a better world and create hope in that sense. And when we've been doing it, we have kind of created safe spaces for students to really engage in discussions about the questions that are most meaningful for them. And in those questions, I've kind of understood the well-being challenges that the young generations are kind of having in a new way, understanding the pressures that they are feeling in the world that we have created for them. Right. And that is something that we, in responsible of education, we cannot kind of say that that's not the business in schools. Somebody else must take care of that. Because if the mind of those young people are burdened with those challenges, the learning won't happen.
Exactly.
So it is also connected to the learning. And in that sense, kind of, it's also a huge kind of pedagogical possibility to kind of touch those questions that the young generations are feeling meaningful in the everyday teaching and learning. And that's, I think, it should be done. And well-being doesn't mean that everything must be easy or nice or fun.
Right.
It means that the challenges must be on the right level and on the right type that they motivate the young generation. And that's something that I wanted to share.
Thank you so much.
The future of higher education, that's a challenging one. I do believe that there is a need to move even more to the kind of multidisciplinary direction, to being able to combine different kind of discipline approaches and understand them. Because I think one of the things that we as humans, what will be an important task for us to be able to reach goals together, utilize each other's abilities in a positive sense. Another thing is that I think that also universities should kind of make sure that the connection between the learner and the world is strong. And it's a direct linkage, because that's really where learning happens.
Right.
And maybe the third one, which is a kind of maybe it's a wistful thinking, but somehow I would like to see that, because in today's world, if you want information, you go to the Google or you ask ChatGPT. If you want kind of knowledge, then you probably go to kind of turn to universities. But the question to be asked is that if you want to start a path towards wisdom, where do you go? Where do you go in today's societies? And somehow I would wish that kind of universities would be places for giving the motivation to start that path of that kind of lifelong path to kind of get interested and intrigued by the ideas of wisdom.
Very good. Thank you so much. I'm just going to sum up kind of what you made me think about while you were sharing all of that. One of them is you cannot learn in dysregulation, in emotional dysregulation. And that's why it's so important that we prioritize the emotional well-being of our young people. Hope is a discipline is something a good friend of mine has often said, and you indicated that that's something we have to do. Moving from apathy to action is really an exercise in hope. And I really loved that. And the last one is that, a multidisciplinary approach is more than just student-centered, it's community-centered, and it offers us opportunities to engage with each other better. So thank you so much, Olli-Pekka. This has been a fascinating conversation, much deeper than I was anticipating.
Thank you so much.
I know, right? Chike, do you feel like you're having some existential questions right now?
No, I thank you very much for what you do, and I thank you for being with us today and sharing.
Yes, so thank you. We have just heard from Olli-Pekka Heinonen, who is the Director General at International Baccalaureate. And my guest co-host is Chike Agyew, Senior Advisor for Project on Workforce at Harvard University and former Chief Innovation Officer at the U.S. Department of Labor. It has been a pleasure speaking with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for giving the opportunity to join. Really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you.
You're very welcome. To our audience, just make sure that you pick up the book Commencement, the Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education by Kate Colbert and Joe Salustio, with contributions by the wonderful Elvin Freites. You'll find over 100 college and university president interviews in that book. It's a great book study, a great read. Thanks for joining us today. To all of our colleagues, friends, and digital neighbors, you've just EdUp'd.
Attention.
It's time to register for Ellucian Live 2024, April 7th through 10th in San Antonio, Texas. Illuminate, innovate, inspire, explore higher education's greatest opportunities with future-ready ideas, solutions, and best practices designed to drive transformation. Register now at elive.ellucian.com. This conference is going to be
Epic.
Hey there, higher ed leaders. Are you thinking about joining the EdUp Experience podcast at Insights EDU on February 20th through 22nd in Phoenix, Arizona?
100%.
I thought so. This is the go-to event for higher education marketing and enrollment management. At Insights EDU, you'll gain cutting-edge insights from industry experts, including speakers from companies like Google, LinkedIn, Adobe, Salesforce, and more. Become the transformational leader your campus needs by participating in discussions on important topics like online student demands and preferences, increasing affordability and accessibility, branding, measuring marketing performance, and much more. Insights EDU is the conference you need to attend in 2024. Register now at insightsedu.com and use the code EdUp to save $50 off your registration.